right, everyone. It's 1 p.m. In Sydney. So, good afternoon to those of you who are in Australia, New Zealand, and the rest of the region. Good afternoon, good morning to those in Tokyo, India, and the rest of Asia. And good witching hour to those joining us from London, Madrid, and the rest of Europe, and a really late evening for those of us who are joining from New York and San Francisco. My name is Sandra Alday from the University of Sydney Business School and the Academy of International Business Sustainability Interest Group. What an absolute privilege for me to welcome you to our inaugural International Business Sustainability Impact Forum. This forum is brought to you by the Academy of International Business and sponsored by the University of Sydney Business School, the University of Bristol, the University of Leeds, and the ESCP Business School. So the forum has 24 sessions in 24 hours, bringing together researchers, practitioners, and policymakers from all over the world to this virtual room to share their latest work on sustainability. So each 50 minute session is structured as having a presentations, or in this case, a panel, followed by a conversation and discussion with you, the audience, on opportunities for collaboration between international business and other stakeholders and actors in the sustainability field. So let's kick off our third session, which builds on the very inspiring work introduced in the previous session. So representing our international business scholarly community, we have Helena Lee from UTS. So Helena is senior lecturer at the University of Technology Sydney Business School, researching how organizations make strategic decisions to drive growth with a particular focus on strategy, innovation, and sustainability. And we're also very privileged to have with us Hanna Ebeling, Chief Executive Officer of Social Enterprise Finance Australia, a not-for-profit organization committed to supporting purpose-driven enterprises through financing, developing partner networks, and capability building. And indeed, social enterprises and financing models have emerged as a major theme in the previous two sessions. We also have Alison Whitten, Director of the Systems Lab at Regen Melbourne, a collective organization of organizations and individuals leading projects and initiatives at the city level to create a safe, just, and sustainable community. And we also have Chandran Nair, the founder and CEO of the Global Institute for Tomorrow, or GIFT, an independent Pan-Asian think tank based in Hong Kong and Kuala Lumpur, focused on advancing a deeper understanding of global issues. So I'm quite excited to have this, what promises to be a really inspiring as well as provocative discussion. So over to you, Chandran, to kick things off.
And it's great to be with the panelists who are on this session. I'm going to take 10 minutes. I think I've been allocated to say a few words. The title that I understand this conference is about is integrating business sustainability impact forums. And I think I was interested because I'd like to disabuse of some of the myths around this idea that business and sustainability are good bedfellows. So that's one of the things I'd like to do. This particular session, as I understand it, is about providing some sort of showcasing practical and achievable pathways towards sustainability. So rather than talk about the work that GIFT does, and we've done over 100 projects in 25 different countries, looking at grassroots policy issues, etc., I would rather talk about the concept of why we created GIFT, and then not do an advertisement for GIFT, but to just say that the whole idea is that the project of the Global Institute is to challenge the current existing narrative around sustainability, and particularly the sort of the mythology that surrounds business schools, suggesting that they have a stake in that sort of future, or even the fact that large companies have sustainability agendas, much of which has been hijacked and morphed into sort of silly, ridiculous things like ESG, etc., much of which has unraveled, as we know, in the last 6 months, particularly in the United States and in Europe. There's a global retreat because none of these companies actually meant anything they said. If you're interested, I was invited by Duke University to Duke CE to write an article around this in their first publication for 2025, and it's called The Great Global Retreat. And my thesis is actually all of this were lies. Nobody believed in any of these things. And as soon as the political environment in America allowed them to take off their masks, they did. And they said, actually, we don't believe in any of this. There's no such thing. But the other problem was that the narrative around sustainability was also one that was steeped in intellectual dishonesty. I come from a science and engineering background, and I wrote a piece. I'm a member of the Club of Rome, if any of you are aware of this organization. And I wrote a piece about 3 years ago saying there is no such thing as net zero. If you come from a science and engineering background, you understand that it's an unscientific myth. And then today, everyone's saying, oh, yeah, it's difficult, etc. Well, it's difficult because there's no such thing. Unless you believe that all these poor countries out there should become your carbon sinks, well, the industrialized world continues to produce, and we will grow little trees and little things and protect our forests, and they will buy carbon credits. So the case study that I want to talk about is the case for different narratives. And without sounding sort of divisive in terms of East, West, and the West and the rest, I think we need to be very clear that most of the narrative around sustainability is dominated by a Western school of thought. And that Western school of thought is dominated by its preoccupation with such things such as democracy, uh, capitalism, and the freedom of the individual, and the idea that technology will be a panacea for everything. That's the narrative. And many of us in the developing world, or what I call the global majority, having been colonized for a long time, not having our own intellectual foundations on which to define the world, bought into this narrative. This narrative is self-serving. It has no interest, essentially, in a global consensus around anything. So if I, normally when I speak to people and I say, can you name me prominent as sustainability experts from China and other parts of the world? Very difficult. But they all know, 18-year-old girl from Sweden. Oh, is she from Sweden? I can't remember. But they all know that because that's the Tarzan and Jane story that Western media loves. It's Hollywood, right? And we're the good people, we care. So this is a narrative that I think is just as important and very important to understand, that the idea that somehow NGOs and small initiatives, and dare I say even social impact funds and all of that, will change the trajectory of the existential threats we face is also deception. It's essentially got to be policy. Why? Because sustainability is essentially about political objectives. We can see this in the United States. As soon as a new administration comes in, they are able to change that. They are dismantling in the United States what they think is, too much woke stuff, and they're doing whatever they want. So we have to understand it's essentially political objectives. Australia is a classic case too, where political objectives essentially determine what the narrative will be. And then there's the media narrative that Australians care, but most people will know, those who care, to look into the facts, that Australia, in terms of the ecological footprints of homes, is one of the highest in the world. I think 10 years ago, I think Perth was the highest in the world. The responsibility of the largest mining companies in Australia in terms of contribution to climate change and emissions, some of the highest in the world. Yet the media narrative is we care, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing, the most important thing to understand is that the challenges we face and which intellectually we have to accept is that the economic model that we are all either buy into, business schools promote without questioning, is essentially at the core of the problem. And the core of the problem is the economic model is premised on promoting relentless consumption. Buy things you don't need with money you have, which is the debt issue, which is then related to how tariffs work or don't work. And I've done a series of talks recently about Donald Trump without probably appreciating it has actually done the world a favor by his tariff war, disproportionately and politically driven, but essentially telling us that we can't. It should be a wake-up call for the world that you can't consume your way into economic prosperity. And he recently did an interview which I thought was very funny. The people who hate him were questioning him about, oh my God, there'll be no toys for American kids come Christmas. And he says, well, they don't need 300 kids, 300 toys, they just need three. And he's damn right about that. But that's a consumption issue. So I think we have to understand the economic model that we've all bought into is essentially at flaw because it relies on promoting relentless consumption, externalizing true costs. That's why your mobile phone is so cheap. And then we all complain about, oh my God, the poor Africans, you know, and all of this. And then we do a bit of social impact to help poor Filipinos and Indians, etc. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand is companies are not evil, but they're not driven by providing public goods. You can't tell Pizza Hut to sell less pizzas. You can regulate them. You can regulate them to essentially remove certain processed ingredients from the food and things like that. You can't tell agricultural companies to essentially remove PFAs unless you regulate. Who fights regulations? The supposedly good guys of the large corporations. You can't tell me that Coca-Cola and McDonald's essentially are sustainability believers, etc. They're purveyors of junk food. Period. I mean, you might like junk food, but it's junk food. And it's no good for kids. It's no good for us. So trying to essentially create narratives. I mean, dare I say, the business schools have done this too much, and are actually the enemy of the truth. Is essentially intellectually dishonest. So that's what we have tried to do, to say, we have an existential threat. What are we going to do about it? So I'll finish my remarks by saying the Western narrative needs to be rejected by the global majority. And why? For the simple fact that the majority in the world cannot and should not aspire to have economic models based on overconsumption. America is the godfather of this, where obesity is out of control. Everything you can imagine is out of control because big and better is essentially worshipped there. You can't tell the majority of the world, the 8 billion people, or today it's 8.1 billion, but the majority of the world is about 6 billion people. The Western world is about 15% of the world, to essentially now copy and ape that economic model. But that's what we're told. That's what they teach in the business school, Harvard Business School, and all of that. It's fiction. So we have to do something else. And what we do cannot depend on the activities of academics working in silos or even social impact funds. It has to be steeped in a different political narrative. And that's what we are interested in. So I wrote a book. My first book was on consumption. And here again, I'm not trying to advertise, but that was the first book written that unless we understand we have to curb consumption, we will not deal with the existential threats. And CO2, greenhouse gas, is just tip of the iceberg. Second, we have to understand that in the majority world, the idea that democracy and freedoms can be unfettered, that the individual can have 5 cars, is essentially a lie, because if you are to deal with climate, water, land use, etc., you're going to have to redefine what people can have. This is anathema in Western democracies. It can't happen. So I've argued, car ownership is not a human right. Neither is a swimming pool in an arid area. But try telling that to Americans, the guns come out. So you have to understand the political narrative. And I'll conclude by therefore saying that in our part of the world, Africa, Middle East, we have to essentially reject that narrative around what is progress, what is prosperity, and what is sustainability. And then understand that the majority of our people, if you take India, for instance, the majority of people don't have the rights to the basic rights. That provision of the basic rights is a fundamental objective of the state and obligation. They'll have to provide that. But if they provide it following the economic mainstream global systems, they will destroy much of the world. So I've argued that 6 billion people in Asia in 2050 aspiring to live like Americans and Europeans will destroy the world. We have to do something very, very different. And that's the narrative that I think we need to have. And I come here to share that rather boldly, but to say that institutions of learning need to essentially also have new curriculums, which are not steeped in hocus pocus, intellectually dishonest narratives, and just purveying it without looking at the science. The science will tell you very clearly we can't have all of these things. So let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chandran, for kicking off a very provocative message, kicking this off with a very provocative message of the need to challenge our predominant myths and narratives. I think that's pretty powerful. And so over to you, Alison.
Great. Thank you very much. And Chandran, that was a perfect global setup, a bold statement to put into context what we are doing at Regen Melbourne. I'm Alison. I'm leading our systems lab at Regen Melbourne. We are a not-for-profit focused on regeneration of Greater Melbourne as a place, but representing a lot of the themes that Chandran has touched on. So I'll cover what we are doing and really looking forward to the discussion. Regen Melbourne emerged out of COVID-19 and the fact that we had just faced ecological crisis with bushfires across the country in Australia just before lockdowns hit. And so we had this crunchy period where we were experiencing this really pointy impact of social and ecological challenges at a global scale, but again, felt very locally and personally for people in Melbourne. We started with a conversation about donut economics as a new framework and model that could shift our orientation in our city. So really shifting that narrative that Chandran was talking about. The donut is focused on how we can meet basic global needs, social needs, creating a strong social foundation, but doing so within the bounds of what the planet can bear ecologically. So we're aiming for that safe and just space, the green donut in this diagram, that where we're meeting needs again without putting undue pressure on the planet. And the diagram on the left represents our sort of graphical orientation to this that emerged from the early work, really just looking at this as a compass and a vision that we could follow for our city. But we've later put data to this to start to say, well, how are we performing? And I think what Chandran's represented in his opening remarks around these trends and challenges is very evident in the data. All the red on the inside of the donut shows that livability, quote unquote, that we have in Greater Melbourne is not equally distributed. Not everyone has access to that same sort of way of living in the city in terms of mobility and housing and education and even food security. And then on the outside, that speaks to what Chandran was talking about. Melbourne is a city of excessive consumption, and that's putting really undue pressure on the planet. And so we can see at a localized level that we're really out of balance in this place. And so Regen Melbourne emerged as a not-for-profit organization that could act independently in service of the city. And we do that through a vision of regeneration for the city. We have a portfolio of projects that we call Earthshots, and we have a systems lab, which I lead, which is focused on how we can unlock change and the enabling factors that need to be part of longer-term systems change. So I'll go through each of these pieces briefly, and I'm happy to come back to questions later in the discussion. So our vision is for a city that is knowledgeable, full of life, collaborative, affordable, and connected through culture. And the last piece there is about being enabled. And that's really thinking about our economic and governance systems that can underpin all of these other kind of physical aspects being achieved. So we really see the what and the how in our vision as being really tightly tied together as we look towards a more regenerative future in the city. Now, when we talk about Earthshots, we're thinking about mission-driven innovation, which is this concept of using goals such as, decades ago, landing on the moon, a goal that then oriented a lot of activity around it for a very clear and specific purpose. And we use that same orientation in our work. This is work that's been developed by Mariana Mazzucato, Dan Hill, from an economics perspective, but how that can be embedded in government and in other contexts to create coherence and create coordination among organizations towards a goal. And so this is around what is an ambition that you can set? What is a clarity of objectives that can bring a variety of organizations from across sectors and very much including business together? And how can that start to agitate the way that the current system works? So we have 3 earth shots within our portfolio that we focus on. One is about making our core river, the Yarra River or the Beer Rung, swimmable. And if you can imagine that as a goal, there's a lot that needs to happen to make that occur in terms of improving water quality, changing policy, changing hearts and minds around this. But there's a lot of benefit that can occur to that as well, and a lot of risk mitigation tied to that. We also have an earth shot around activating our streets and building in regeneration and participatory governance at a localized level, using streets as an agent and a unit for change. And finally, our 15-minute cornucopias is focused on how we can reform our food system to be more resilient and to serve the needs of people and planet more holistically. Despite being a foodie city, we really are not in service of people and place in the fullest sense through our food. So these are the core projects that we focus on. Now, the systems lab, as I mentioned, is really focused on these enabling pieces that we need to make this happen. And core to that, and really first in this, is narrative. What are the stories that we tell? Who actually is writing those stories, and who are they serving? We need to be unpacking that and changing the way that that occurs. The second is around, what do we measure? Are we actually measuring things that align with what we say we value, or are we too focused on GDP as the singular metric that's kind of leading us astray at many levels? The third is around governance, and how do we have new forms of governance that can help to activate communities in a truer sense of what democracy has the potential to unlock beyond just this consumerist and individualist kind of mindset? How can we move towards a service orientation in that system? We look at systemic investment. How do we shift finance and capital in different ways that can look at holistic need in a system and not just singular activity? And finally, we will look at the way that we do research, not just the need for research, but how are we organizing that so that it can be activated for public good? So all of these things are then baked into our earth shots. So we look at it as a holistic portfolio of activity where we're looking at the what and the how together. What does governance look like on the river? How can research activate change within our food system? How does measurement change the way we understand our streets and all of these things? And so we have a series of projects that we're focused on that are asking these questions. They're experimenting, they're aiming to change, but they're also aiming to inform the system more broadly. So this is how we structure our work. And again, I'm really excited to dig into some of the discussion and the role of business in this space. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Alison, and absolutely very keen to push ahead to the discussion. We have a very interesting emerging narrative out of this session, starting with the need to look at our consumption patterns from Chandran, and then Alison coming in to say, yep, no, there are ceilings indeed to consumption, and the challenge of doing economics differently. In line with Alison's point on needing to look at investment and financing differently as well as and finance and investment as enabling different ways of doing business, I'd like to pass on to Hanna for ideas and case studies on how to do that. Over to you, Hanna.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll also be sharing a couple of slides for you to follow me through. So I am the CEO of an organization called Sefa, and we are working very much at the intersection between the demand from organizations such as Regen and Melbourne and other social purpose organizations in terms of support, primarily through obviously funding, but maybe also capability building in terms of enhancing their capacity to unlock more social impact. So that's what we refer to as the demand side. And then the supply side as well of capital. So that could be government funding. It could be what we refer to as impact investors, so very mission and socially aligned investors. But it could also be more traditional institutional funders, such as not only banks and super funds, obviously here in the Australian context, getting into sustainable investments. And certainly, very progressively also philanthropy and other high net worth individuals and family offices. So they obviously invest through grants or also repayable capital. So we see Sefa really as sort of that enabling intermediary body. And before I dive into the detail, I would also just take a quick moment to acknowledge country. I'm dialing in today from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and like all Sefa team members, we are based here in Sydney. And so Sefa, as mentioned, in this intermediary role is really there to catalyze investment and investment more broadly. So not only referring to capital, which is, I guess, our origin. So we're operating a $10 million private debt fund. We've dispersed close to $50 million of loans, but I've already mentioned the various partners we are working with on the supply side. So in total, we're actually getting close to having unlocked $160 million as investment capital into the sector, which is a blend of, repayable capital such as loan, could be equity investment, but also grant funding from both government and philanthropy. So it comes down to really solving, I guess, the puzzle of capital to find the right solution that is for purpose. And so for us, given that we've got a national mandate, and obviously there's a lot of what we refer to as social wicked problems in the area, we're actually active across a broad range of impact areas. We've been leading quite a lot of work around equity in the last couple of years, but overall housing definitely is a key issue here in Australia, as well as like employment focused enterprise, especially those employing young people or otherwise excluded from the normal employment market. So how are we doing that? I already talked a little bit and touched upon a little bit on that capital side of things. It is run by Sefa's social finance team, which you see here on the screen to the left-hand side. And we're obviously deploying different solutions or different products of impact investing. So we've got that direct lending out of the Sefa Loan Fund. I already mentioned, other impact investors, high net worth family offices that lend or invest alongside us through so-called co-investment syndicate club deal arrangements. And then we are also a big fan of creating blended finance solutions to make them more affordable for socially driven projects, where we are blending government grants or private philanthropic grants with other forms of capital. So a lot of our expertise when it comes sort of more to the service offering beyond the product is around that capital structuring, providing capital raising support to really create a solution that's fit for purpose from a financial perspective for the organization or the project. And being obviously around for a while, over the first sort of probably 5 or 6 years of Sefa's existence, we were only operating left-hand side of the screen, the capital pillar, but we really identified that a lot of organizations need a little bit of extra support, investment ready, and to really truly unleash their full potential to create impact. So over the last 5 years, we actually established a second pillar of work to sit alongside capital. It also starts with a C, we refer to it as capability building. So we are offering a range of very tailored advisory services, but I'd say we go a lot deeper. We are not necessarily leaving clients behind with a PowerPoint deck. We are really walking alongside them and building the confidence and the resilience within the organization to better articulate impact, to define with confidence and strategy, to down a justifiable ask in terms of investment that they are seeking, and then also helping them on that journey of investment readiness. So we see these two tools, capital and plus capability, increase overall in I guess as a sum, the capacity of an organization to unlock more impact. And so I wanted to also touch upon specifically how we are actually seeing different business models making a change in the world, in particular here in Australia, and how we really think we are investing in impact through both capital and capability. And quite broadly, obviously, we've got the two, I guess, constant challenges of running a sustainable business that have a unique value proposition, services customers, obviously is financially sustainable to achieve longevity and independence and sort of self-reliance. But really the crux is here to balance that out with, and sometimes there's a trade-off, as we very much see as practitioners, between obviously the impact mission, the underlying DNA of the business, of why it exists, the social purpose. And so that impact model can actually take different forms to then work really together with the commercial side of the business from an overall model perspective. So we're distinguishing between the three forms of embedded impact, integrated, and external. And next slide, I take those three a little bit more apart and provide a little bit more detail around. Starting with the embedded impact model, it's really around where social impact activities directly create revenue for the business. So it's really embedded kind of in the value chain of the business. It's primarily, the prime example is primarily employment related enterprises, or so-called WISEs, work integrated social enterprises. So they're creating an economic opportunity for a particular cohort, and obviously, provide all of that social value creation within the organization as part of the operating processes. The impact model too is very diverse in terms of it runs programs or potentially even products or related services that underpin its social impact activities. And so that could be anything, from a community need around housing. It could be also regenerative food systems, or it could be particular, mental health support for young people. So in terms of the accessibility and sort of who it caters to, that really depends on the core social purpose of this particular impact model. And then the last but not least impact model, which I think has probably, sort of taken quite a lot of, oops, sorry, I wanted to quickly pop back there. Mouse was a little bit too fast. The external impact model is often referred to as profit for purpose, redistributing either profits or a share of the revenue towards a charitable or a social purpose. So that could be a commercial business model, such as here in Australia, you might have heard of Hugo the Crab, the toilet paper that is using recycled inputs and then distributing a significant share of their profits towards hygiene projects in different emerging markets. It's also Thank You, the brand that creates a lot of like hand wash, body care products in supermarkets, or the Tom's shoes. You buy one, you pay one forward, or give one away, one product. And that really obviously depends on how ethical the overall commercial value creation chain is. And then how thoughtful, or I guess how directly linked the business's success is to then the ultimate goal of redistributing those profits into a social cause. And now jumping to the theory of change, that's really an articulation of an organization's impact business model. It starts with a problem statement in terms of what is the problem at hand, and obviously a hypothesis around how this particular impact model can address the problem. And then it runs through a very logical flow of, if we use certain inputs to do X, Y, and Z as an activity, this will result in very easily short-term measurable outputs. So it's literally counting widgets, counting, as we call it, it's stuff at Sefa. But then actually, as a follow-on consequence, those outputs, through the logical flow of the intervention of this impact model, flow to particular outcomes, which can be obviously of shorter-term nature, but also medium-term and longer-term. And those outcomes, that's the difference, or the delta, that we actually see in terms of change in the world. So it could be, for example, an improvement of health for organization and for an individual, or it could be a reduction in a recidivism rate. It really obviously again depends on the particular social mission or impact the organization is seeking. So that is something that the organization has got more direct influence on, or can also directly more, I guess more rigorously attribute to its own operations. And then an accumulation of these different outcomes contributes. So there's the difference between a direct attribution, the closer we remain at the impact business model, And the further we move outside the direct sphere of influence of that impact model and go into the more broader impact level, surrounding in the environment, in the, adjacent society community, it's more of a contribution toward, the broader impact goal. So all of our clients really work within, different forms of business models, and we are really trying to support them with both capital and capability that, is suitable for them at the right stage in their overall organizational development. And also looking forward likewise to questions later on out of the conversation.
Thanks so much, Hanna. And I think you've got a massive challenge ahead of you, Helena, bringing together the threads of overconsumption, establishing a way of an economic model that highlights that there are ceilings to consumption, and bringing in the need to have capital and capability to really enable businesses to have embedded impact to their business model. So over to you, Helena.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, as Andrea mentioned, it's quite challenging because we are from quite different kind of perspective. As an international business scholar or educators, we work across diverse value systems and institutional contexts. That's why in our field, we are very grounded in appreciating differences, different values, and the way accepting narratives or question things are not the same. We need a kind of not one size fits for all model. We need to really look at things differently, embedded in the local context, right? That's really the core of international business as a field itself. We want to develop a more context-sensitive insights to understand business, the relation between business and the academic world. So with this in mind, like the core value in the international business based on all your talk, I think what really stood out across these three different presenters is how we're gonna do things differently. You guys are asking challenging the ways of doing things, because I see the first speaker, Chandran, like really wanna criticize the way UTS, the way business school is working, operating. And Alison, you also calling for changing the way of thinking, how we build our city to embed more multiple stakeholder. And Hanna, you are proposing the models that not just one model, you are divided all these three models to suit all these different needs, right? So my question for it's a discussion for you based on your experience in working in your different fields. If there is one thing, one action you want a business school to address, especially in the international business field, what would you like us to teach our future talents or workforce for you, like about sustainability, like that can help you to reach the goals you want to reach? So yes, I want to over to everybody's. Yeah, that's the first question.
Thanks, Helena. So we might request the tech team to bring us to panel view. So thank you. The challenge is for the panelists to put forward ideas and to the international business community and business schools. How do we move forward? Chandran.
Okay, yeah. As someone who's taught at business schools, I might make a few suggestions. Someone who's also, learned about the denial in business schools, I will make some suggestions and wish you all the best of luck, because until the business schools change their 20th century thinking model about what is growth, prosperity, and stop teaching us that the earth is a flat world, then we will not get progress, at least as far as the business schools are concerned. I think the business schools are going to be irrelevant until they change their discourse, but it's very difficult, just like in any business, right? So there's great denial. The first thing I think you all need to do is stop engaging finance professors and others who mislead young people. And suggest that somehow finance is some sort of natural law and that profits are human right. So they might want to teach people that essentially, and bring anthropologists, others, because that's also business. But the whole business school culture, and dare I say, Alison, with due apologies to the Americans, is an American creation. It's kind of the American dream, you know, whatever you do. If you look at the biggest crisis that we've had, financial crisis, et cetera, in the world, the architects of all of these went to supposedly the best business schools. They actually are not the best in any sort of definition that I can think of, but they were taught how to leverage finance and essentially all that nonsense about competitive advantage. So I would think you need to have very different faculty. You need to get rid of so much of the purveyors of the old system understanding, but you don't need boring scientists, but you do need anthropologists, social policy makers, construct, etc., to understand. I'll distill that to one recommendation. The unanswered question of the market economy is simply this: what is the price of externalities? No business school that I know of, and I have taught about wants to go into what is the true cost of the externalities of products and services. They don't. The true cost of eating junk food is very severe. What is the true cost of my mobile phone? It's wars. What is the true cost of all of these? So I think business schools, if they could make it the center of teaching business, answer this question: what's the true cost of doing business? And start pricing externalities, and stop talking about fiction such as net zero, and then this, half an hour is done. Let's go back to how we create Ponzi schemes. Then that would be the restructuring. But I think you'll have a major struggle because it's so entrenched. They're just no different from the fossil fuel companies, et cetera. They have a business model, and they attract students who want to learn about how to scam the system. And you need to revolutionize that. So that's as bluntly but politely as I can put it.
Thanks so much, Chandran. And I might suggest that we pass on to Hanna because of the major theme of finance and investment that has emerged in that in Chandran's challenge.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's obviously interesting. I fully agree, Chandran, in terms of obviously the systems approach from negative externalities. And, we are looking very much at positive outcomes that are being generated by social purpose organizations that, at the moment, nobody rewards them for. And obviously there's, a lot of momentum on the way, in particular from a government perspective, to explore that payment by outcomes, or, social impact bonds that have been tried all over the world to actually, attribute the actual, the financial value equivalent to generating those social outcomes. Sefa obviously works very much at an organization level directly with our social purpose organizations. And at that point, when it, for example, comes to structuring deals or using finance as a tool, we can't really just use traditional due diligence methods. I mean, there has to be a robust, equitable process, but we are seeing, for example, that we apply a lot more lateral thinking. We are able to live with uncertainty, and probably is also an element to be comfortable with failure. But it comes down to also looking at other factors that are currently left behind by, let's say, for example, traditional bank credit analysis, things like a strong volunteer network, a strong long-standing track record and good relations with government. All of these factors you can't see on a balance sheet. So there's a lot of intangible assets and attributes of a social purpose organization that actually make them, I think, more creditworthy and more resilient. And it's, a lot of times, basically, the numbers don't look that good on paper. So it requires a lot more sort of out-of-the-box thinking, creativity, I'd say, from students in terms of, obviously applying all the same methodology with rigor, but then always asking the, like, so what? Or, like, why do you think it should be done that way? So I think it also means that, for example, a lot of several people in our team don't actually have got that transaction experience from, let's say, a commercial investor or commercial bank. You can apply, the investment lens also by reading numbers and then creating more of that sort of out of the box thinking. So I think it's also a good, I guess, good news for students who want to maybe move into different careers, multidisciplinary, sort of innovative thinking, and also people who are just able to put together, let's say, a group or collective of individuals with different skills. So I think it opens up overall in the future a lot more varied employment pathways or career pathways than previously, because that's what we need to solve these wicked problems.
Helena, before you bring in Alison, just 30 seconds. This is not about finance. This is about how do you price goods and services, which is a very different thing. What is the true cost of the water in a can of Coca-Cola? What is the true cost of sugar? And therein, to finish, essentially business schools need to start bringing that and bring in, companies don't price things properly because it's not in their interest. So pricing is important, and that's where policy comes in. Who fights policies? The students taught in a business school. So you have to teach them what is the true cost, social cost of consumption, and it's not finance.
Thanks, Chandran. I think that's a great lead into Alison's piece to the price of the true price of externalities. Alison.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the work that we're doing offers a really interesting bridge in a lot of these perspectives, because obviously our goal, if we're looking at donut economics as a frame, that is a radical alternative to the way that our economy currently functions. And it involves understanding externalities entirely differently and seeing the system as a whole. So that's our goal. And yet we also know we operate in a system that's really far from that. And so we've realized we can't be, to operate on the ground, we can't be purists. And so we refer to the 3 horizons framework quite a bit, which I think is very relevant in this space, which is about, how do we keep that long-term view in mind and work on responses and activity that's moving us towards that, while at the same time, that's our 3rd horizon that we're aiming for, while at the same time we step back. Horizon 2 is the really disruptive activity that's more accessible at this stage, and I think is really representative of a lot of the innovation that Hanna presented in how you do finance differently. What are the ways within our current systems that are sort of touching the edges and aiming to push us further? And likewise, what do we do within the current system just to nudge and start to demonstrate where those failures are? So I think within a business school context or any context, kind of seeing those 3 tracks and orientations simultaneously is challenging, but I think it's really important. And we just know that if we're only doing one of those things, we're not going to move the needle given the scale of the challenges that we're facing socially and ecologically at this stage. So it's a little bit, we go from a yes and all in, let's not, put one model down over another, because we need that big long-term change overall. So I think that's kind of an interesting offering in a way that our work really represents that in the way that we operate within and alongside the current system.
So what do you think, Helena? Can business schools actually do their bit to actually shift the narrative that we have in front of us?
I think it's like based on all the 3 different speakers, their suggestions. I think the core thing comes out from all the speakers is we really need to change the way we are teaching. For example, we can't really follow the textbook, which is dominant in the US or in a very dominant context, the world views. We really need to, maybe we don't have the textbook anymore. Like we need to bring like Alison, like Hanna, like Chandran, these kind of speakers into the class to get more balanced view of what's going on, actually what we really value as the skills we are developing in the business school. And we really need to change the curriculum, not just following like the numbers. We need to think beyond the numbers. We need to be really creative in solutions. I think that is something our scholars can change our mindset first, and our capability need to change too. We can't just focus on business per se. We really need to think about, as an international business scholar, what is out of the box we can engage into our teaching, into our research, and into our class. So I think we want to do that, and I see some trend in the different business school, but it's not that like dominant now. It's still a trend, but we need a critical side, like a change, this kind of critical perspective to really advocate the different world view on that. Yeah. Do we have another 10 minutes for another question I can provoke? So
Chandran first. I think you wanted to say something before
Helena
another.
and Sandra. I mean, I at the outset didn't want to talk too much about my organization, but over the last 15 years, we have developed that curriculum. So if you guys are interested, we will send you. It's world class. It's the only one that exists. I teach some of that at the Cambridge Institute of Sustainable Leadership, CISL. it is challenging even for the students because most of them came to drink the Kool-Aid. So most business schools and all these sustainability institutes teach the same old Kool-Aid. It's also very Western centric, you know, because no one wants to talk about this. So, you know, Melbourne and Mumbai, everything you've talked about, good, but it's completely irrelevant if you then take the larger world. So Mumbai is very different, or Jakarta, or Lagos. But if you got an African student, I mean, why does he need to know about what's happening in Sydney or London? It's completely irrelevant. But that's what business schools do. Case studies, same old nonsense. So you need people who have developed curriculums that show the world. So if you're interested, I'm happy to get in touch. But business schools, I've approached schools. I mean, they are bureaucracies, they are vested interests, etc. So we're talking openly here, but it's like if you need to reinvent, you can't play around the edges. You have to break the system. And I'm here, I joined this to say, you got to break the system because that system is teaching old stuff. I come from a business background. I know what this is about. So there are things, but business schools are afraid because they are stuck, just like many universities are stuck in the same old, and business circles as well. So happy to share.
Thank you.
Yes, please, Chandran. I think we've got a massive community of business schools that are keen to learn from you and to learn also from
They probably hate my guts
Regen
by
Melbourne.
now, but I said they probably hate my guts by now, but
I think we all kind of need a knock to the head, and I as moderator of this session, I have the distinctly unfun job of bringing all the fun to an end. Unfortunately, Helena, Alison, Chandran, and Hanna. So I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us in this really provocative and mind-blowing session. And thank you to those who have dialed in as well. I'd like to close by saying that it does take a village to change the world. Let's join the conversation. Let's join the movement. We are that village. So see you all at the next session at the top of the hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very
Bye.
well.